I'm sorry I got cut off, but the railroads are going to be built mainly in the north, and this is going to help during the American Civil War. So during the American Civil War, what you're going to see happening is the North has all these railroads, and so President Lincoln is going to use the railroads to ship soldiers to the front lines and ship supplies to them. So it's really going to mobilize the North to win the Civil War. We're also going to see some improvements in agriculture. So you got a lot of people who are moving out west, and not everybody's a farmer. A lot of the people who are moving out west, they know about maybe southern farmland, but they don't know about western farmland. And there's a huge difference between like the southeast of the United States and the Midwest. So when they're moving out to the Midwest, they're going to have some new inventions to help them out. John Deere invents the steel plow, and the steel is going to be able to cut through that tough soil in the Midwest easier. And that means you got farmers who can take land that was once kind of, we don't know what we can do with it, and now you know exactly what you can do with it. You can farm, and you can farm it easier than ever before because of the steel plow. Then you got McCormick, who is going to invent the mechanical reaper. With McCormick's mechanical reaper, you have a horse or a mule, and it would pull this like cycle of blades that would cut down basically your crops. And so your crops would be cut down, and you would have one man doing the job of 5 men. And why is that important is now a small farmer doesn't have to hire help in order for him to actually get all of his crops, all of his harvesting done. And so it just makes things easier for them. Now they do have kids, and their kids are basically used as hands on the farm because everybody is required to kind of work on the farm to keep the farm going. But now you don't have to hire people, your kids have to work for free. Yep, that's how it works. Regional differences, we're going to look at North versus South. The actual Industrial Revolution started in Great Britain a long time ago, but the Industrial Revolution is going to come to the United States in the 1800s. So the factory system is going to develop, and it develops in the northern region. Now it develops here because remember, up here it's really cold, and you're not going to be able to farm because the land's not meant for farming, and so you need to find an indoor job like a factory. The Industrial Revolution with like the interchangeable parts with Eli Whitney. I know you guys know Eli Whitney for the cotton gin, but I also need you to know him for interchangeable parts. So what Eli Whitney does is he does this demonstration of how to build a gun and build it very quickly, and he does it in front of a president. So when he does this, he does it right, real fast. And so what ends up happening is that we see, oh my goodness, you can build something that quick. That means we can do mass production, and anytime you do mass production, cost of an item goes down, and so that means the cost of living is going to start improving, because everybody's going to want extra stuff. The cotton gin, remember that the cotton gin, thanks to the cotton gin, we're going to see an increase in the demand for slavery because all of a sudden cotton is actually profitable. And so when cotton becomes profitable is because it's cheaper. It's cheaper to produce, it's cheaper to actually harvest. And so now slave owners are going to buy more slaves, and they're going to buy more land, and they're going to farm more and more. And then by the 1840s, they start getting broke because the Northern Industrial Revolution is starting to really take hold. The factories are growing, and they're starting to make money. So the Lowell system, I know we talked about it, but basically it's just a factory that hires females, and it's really organized. You have somebody doing the same work every single day, and that would turn a human being into a human machine, just like what Henry Ford does on his assembly line, except you don't do it quite like that. Like, they don't have the assembly line like Henry Ford's going to do it, where he has the actual car moving to you. They just do the same thing. So they would constantly, sew a sleeve on. That's all they did. When you look at the society of the North, the owners of the industries are the middle, the upper class. Laborers are always going to be at the bottom, and typically your laborers are your immigrants and your poor white people. They're typically uneducated. They might be able to sign their name, they might not. First unions are going to develop, but they're not very successful. Remember, the Knights of the Labor is going to be the first union, but it kind of accepts skilled and unskilled labor. Doesn't really work because you can't meet the needs of a skilled and an unskilled worker in the same union. Like teachers and McDonald's workers, we have different concerns. I'm concerned about like safety at the workplace with like crazy kids coming in a building. McDonald's workers probably worried about safety, like oil and grease on the ground so that they don't slip. So we got different concerns. So a union with teachers and McDonald workers probably just isn't going to work. So you actually have to separate your workers, your skilled versus unskilled laborers. So the first unions developed, but they're not quite that good. So like the Knights of Labor, remember they have their downfall at the Haymarket Square riot. And that's where that anarchist throws the bomb and it kills the cops. So anti-slavery movements are going to be in the North. They're not really very strong. They become stronger in 1852 with the publication of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. So when she writes that book and she shows the separation of slave families, it pulls at the heartstrings of a lot of northern women, and then they tell their husbands about it, and then their husbands read it, and it's like wildfire. You know, the spark is lit and everybody's joining the abolitionist movement in the North. And in the late 1850s, you see a lot of people in the North being in the abolitionist movement, and that's going to be one of those long-term causes for the Civil War. Now, her book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, is a short-term cause because it's written in 1852. The North is generally viewed as the poor region of the United States until the late 1840s, and it's really because by the 1840s, the factories are starting to grow and they're starting to make money. Remember, when you own a business, it normally takes about 10 years for your business to actually show profit. Here's what northern factories kind of look like. And remember, when we get to like the Gulf 5 time period, you're going to have tenements, which are where the factory workers lived. They're typically run down, overcrowded, dirty, disease-ridden buildings. They're going to be near these things. Nobody wants to live near a factory because of the fact that you got tenements, you got the urban slums, and you got all the pollution. They don't have pollution laws back then. There's no environmental protection agency. That's not going to be invented until the 1970s. And then when you get the EPA, you know, things clean up. But I mean, like before that, things are pretty gross around the factories. In the South, the Southern agriculture is the king. So plantation owners, planters, they're going to be really the ruling elites of the society. This is called neoclassical architecture. This is something that we see going on during this time period too. It's neoclassical because you have these Greek Roman columns. So what you see like with the White House and Congress and all those buildings in DC is a neoclassical architecture. It's New Greek and Roman. That's all it means. And so you have all these columns. And so this would be the architecture of the day. This is what you would see. Farmers and slaves are going to be at the bottom of the like social pyramid. Immigrants don't really settle in the South. There's no point in them settling in the South. There's no factories. They really can't own any land because the plantation owners own all the land. There's no work because the slaves are taking all the unskilled jobs. So really, immigrants just don't travel to the actual South. When you look, here are the actual plantation slave quarters, and this is a picture taken in 1934, and this is by the Federal Writers Project that FDR actually does. So cotton is king. Cotton is a valuable crop. It's a cash crop for the South. And what it does is it does require a lot of hand labor because they have to pick it. They have to use that cotton gin to sort out the seed and the actual cotton. And that's going to make cotton profitable again. And because it makes cotton profitable, cotton is king, or cotton kingdom, is going to be a reference always to the southern region and the southern economy. So cotton is king allows the South to dominate the economy until the 1840s. And that's really when those northern manufacturers are starting to become wealthier and more self-sufficient. There's a lot of sectional differences, like land, free land versus market value. Free land, the South likes free land because you have a lot of poor whites in the South, and they could get that land for free. Then they could buy slaves, and that's going to expand slavery. So they wanted to see the expansion of slavery. They wanted to keep America an agrarian or agricultural-based economy. The North, they like a market value. They like to actually pay for land. Now, why? Is because their money is not always tied up, and so they have more money. They're wealthier. They have more money, so they can actually purchase the land, and that means that the South isn't going to continue to see the expansion of slavery. So you got some differences, okay? Another one of the differences is on tariffs, high versus low. Tariffs, remember, are taxes on imported goods. So the North, who is making a lot of goods, they're making a lot of factory goods, they love high tariffs because it protects their company, it protects their factories, their industries, and it forces the Southerners to purchase their goods. See, Southerners typically like low tariffs because they like to buy the cheap European goods. Remember the example that we did with the cost of the hat in Gold 2 booklet? This is going to be cheaper for them. So when you put a tax on anything, a tariff, what happens is that some price is going up. And so when the tariff is really high, your domestic prices are now the cheapest. So whatever was made in America is going to be the cheapest good, and so that's what you buy. So people get a little upset about this because typically what has happened is that an American-made good has always cost a lot, and now you're just making the European good cost a whole lot, but you never lowered the price of the American-made good. The American-made good was always $2, and the European good was $1.50, but now the European good is $3, and so you're having to buy the American-made good, but you're still spending 50 cents more than you would have previously. Slavery is another sectional issue. There's only a select group of people who dislike slavery in the North, and they're the abolitionist group. Now, by the 1850s, you're going to start seeing more Northerners disliking it. The South is pretty pro-slavery because their entire economy is based on free labor. If they actually had to pay for the people who are actually on their plantations, paying every single day for the labor, they would not be able to keep the plantations. I mean, you're talking hundreds of acres of land, and they're having a free labor system farming that for them. The American system, remember this. This is an economic program created by Henry Clay. Henry Clay, the great compromiser in American history. He creates that Compromise of 1820, the Missouri Compromise. He does the American system. He does the Compromise of 1850. The guy does a lot of compromising. So when he creates the American system, it's a compromise. It's an economic plan meant to unite the two regions, the North and the South. What he wants to do, he wants to impose a high tariff. So the reason why he wants to do a high tariff is to protect the northern factories. They're baby factories, and he needs to go ahead and allow them to mature so that they can actually compete later against foreign competition. So protect them now by putting this high tariff on them, let them build up, and then eventually you'd be able to get rid of the tariffs. So let them build, make people buy American goods to keep the factories open and operating, and as time goes on you can decrease them. He wants to recreate the bank, so he wants to make the second national bank, and the whole reason is to stabilize the currency because the U.S. currency, the economy is a little bit shaky, and so he wants to stabilize it. Then he wants to do internal improvements, and internal improvements would be like canals and roads. So he does the Erie Canal, the national roads, the Cumberland roads. So he wants to build these things to allow for trade to function smoothly. If the South is growing all the cotton and the North has all the actual textile companies, the ones that are actually going to turn the cotton into a shirt, then the South's got to be able to get their cotton up to those factories so that they can produce something with it. And so now you're going to have to ship it back down to the South once it becomes a t-shirt for them to buy. So you would need roads and canals to help you out with that. A system of internal improvements. So he builds the Erie Canal. It's going to connect the Atlantic to the Great Lakes, so the Hudson River to the Great Lakes. The national road system is going to develop, and the railroads are really kind of starting in the North. Henry Clay is from Kentucky, and John C. Calhoun is from South Carolina, and both of them are going to promote this, and that's why it passes. So it's a Southern and Western bill. So this is why he's kind of the great compromiser. The guy always tries to work with other people to get stuff passed. Here's the Erie Canal. So it's a man-made ditch, and you're basically building a ditch to go ahead and flood it so that you can transport goods north, south, east, west, however you need to. So it's a water road, basically.